GTPA Practice number 1. So we'll go through this series is that we're going to have a look at the requirements from the booklet and then examine some good high quality examples in both primary and secondary. So going through the booklet, and it's important that you thoroughly understand what is required for each criteria. So pre-read your whole booklet, highlight relevant things digitally or physically, and understand what the task requires. So all the practices are here, the 5 practices and so on, and it gives some introduction, which is useful information. The nuts and bolts will be covered in each section. So for planning practice number 1, you notice there's 2 sections. One's a data section and one is a curriculum section. So it's planning using data for the whole class of individuals. Notice that these criteria collected a range of data, establish students' current level of performance, official curriculum, and opportunities for explicit teaching of literacy and numeracy are the exact descriptors in the criteria sheet. So it's set out this way. So it goes into the various sections. What do I need to do? It tells you what I'm required to do. A full range of abilities, the whole class. You have 3 focus students, for example. It then goes on to say, what do I need to submit? Now, it gives 800 to 1,000 words, but can I suggest you might want to spend more than that on the first section, because this section sets up, section 1 and 2 particularly, set up the whole thing here. Notice the word count. Any evidence you embed or annotations you write is not included in the word count. It talks about you need to collect data for the whole class and your 3 focus students. And the purpose is so you can then make data-informed decisions about that. Here's your required evidence. It says required, it's mandatory. You must complete a profile table, which is here, and we'll see that. Must use pseudonyms. You must have your planning documents. A sustained learning sequence or unit of work must be included, it's required. And you must have accompanied data samples that made your decision-making process in terms of your teaching decisions and your analysis. So they're your requirements. So every section of the GTPA has what is required evidence. These 2, submit and required, really need to understand that well. The first section talks about the criteria and then what I need to do. Interestingly, as a point of contrast, section number 2, again, has the criteria, what I need to do, what I need to submit, and that's it. In other words, section number 1 has twice the amount of information, and that's probably gives an indication of its importance to this task. So let's go to a sample of work. This one we're looking at is at the secondary sample. And as I discussed previously, it uses all the affordances of a report genre. Notice collect and interpret a variety of student data. The diagnostic for and summative purposes is exactly the criteria that is in the booklet. So you set out your structure of your GTPA, headings and subheadings, in accordance with the booklet requirements. So going through, so we're going to look for a range of data, and you need to evidence that. So we've got qualitative data, subheading, class data, because it says you must have whole class and focus students. They have observations about them, getting to know you activity, understand the student, the person, that through a survey talked about, okay, therefore I will do this in response. So it's connecting the data with a responsive teaching already way of working, analyze that into graphs and tables, and provided a small summary for those 3 focus students out of that whole class data. Further, quantitative data. So went to these are the areas here. So it's telling me already, forecasting, this is what I'm going to be looking at. Exam results, exam results, and pre-test results. And to establish the current level of performance of a student, a pre-test is mandatory. You can't say what they have without collecting. Now, it might not be a test, it might be a sample of work, but it's an initial data to collect. Going through, we see those, they're represented in tables and graphs with annotations. In other words, saying, look at me. Look at what this is telling me. So rather than write a paragraph and try and connect with the information, annotations with embedments are one of the core attributes of this task, and you're highlighting the various aspects of your data. This is obviously a pre-test, and then it expands upon a little bit. Here's a summary that says, this is what student A, here's my NAP plan, here's my grades, here's my interest, here's my survey, and this is my response. I really applaud the student putting the last column here, is what is my responsive teaching strategy. So we see gradual release, responsibility, explicit teaching, etc., modality, tiering, choice boards, scaffolding, for example. All those things are now forecasting what you're going to do and demonstrate evidence of practice in section number 2. So it really bridges extremely well the data choices. So has this person achieved, collect, interpreted, and interpreted a range of data? Yes, they have. Have they established the current level of performance? Yes, they have, with a pre-test. And are they ready for learning? Now we're going to have a look in the second part and see whether there is a curriculum focus for that. So, didn't miss this. Here's a descriptive summary of what the table is saying. So putting those two things together are a great template for the section. So A, B, and C. Now we're going to use the official curriculum. So here they're showing, here's the curriculum, an excerpt from the planning documents of the school. More detailed, here is the official curriculum from the school. Learning goals, prerequisites, and so on. Is it official? It looks official to me. And then they've translated this into their own teaching plan. So because the task requires them to plan a connected teaching and learning sequence. So we've got the curriculum, but we also need to then show our planning. And we see they've done that. Notice you've got curriculum codes, for example, so it's official curriculum. So they've then got demonstrate, here's the lessons I'm going to do. And the last one was to identify opportunities for explicit teaching of general capabilities, including, so there's a bit of a loud voice, so it must include literacy and numeracy. And it goes through here for the an overview of that in the planning. The last, and it was a mandatory inclusion, is here's all my data collects for this part of the sample. And here's my data collects for all the other sections. So that's a mandatory inclusion of the data. So have a look at what's required, what's the data, what's its purpose, where'd you get it, what APSTs match, and so on, whether you created it or it was created by someone else and is relevant to the whole task. So that is a very comprehensive. So if I go and look at this, this is met. Remember, there's no HDs, although this is a very high level example. I need to know, have they met this? Have they collected and interpreted a range of data? Yes, they have. Have they established the current level of performance and evidence that? Yes, they have. Have they used official curriculum, unit plan? Yep. Have they connected to this? Yes, they have. Are they identified opportunities for these? Yes, they have. Although that's maybe the smallest section of what they've got here. So this is very much a strong met. Now let's come across and have a look at another sample and this sample is a primary sample. So it should have the same information, but maybe slightly different information. This is an English example, where the first example is a mathematics example. So data analysis, qualitative data. I did observations. I had discussions with my mentor teacher. I then got some whole previous results. Here's the distribution of the grades that they have for their class, previous results. My focus students, after analysing this, middle academically, low here, for example, for Billy, is their pseudonym, quantitative data summary. So they've summarised. So they've shown me the data, they've written about the data, and they've summarised it in a table. The learner profile, interest, for those things here. Then they did quantitative data, and they used NAP plan, English results, and ACER results. So they collated that information. They did a work sample, an initial work sample, to establish the student's current level of performance, and collected that. And notice, although they don't have lines, they've provided annotations about what we are looking at here. That's the beauty of annotations. Annotations focus the reader to what's important and what's your embedded evidence, and use them to advantage. So they've done it for A, B, and C students, and then they've provided cognitive commentaries on those things here. Notice they've used the boldest bold words. This is my qualitative data. This is what the work sample said. This is what the quantitative data said. And then they've done that therefore. Therefore, I will use this gradual release of responsibility, explicit modelling as a support and a scaffold. And they could have done scaffolding, explicit modelling as an addition. And they've done the same for here. So they're going to talk about mobility. I'm going to focus with tiered instruction. In other words, they're forecasting what they're going to find, I'm going to read about as a responsive teaching in section number 2. Now we're looking at the curriculum, your overview, and they provided here the alignment of the unit with achievement standards, general capabilities. Is how I'm going to go and do these general capabilities. I provide official curriculum in the sense of an assessment task. So I'm showing this as official curriculum. And here's my teaching and learning plan. So they want to maybe not quite finely matched to the criteria sequence. So they've done, here's my translated it into a sequence of teaching and learning plan. And here they have here. Here's what I'm doing with 1 through to week 6. And here's my mandatory profile that I've completed. Now, if I go back to and say, well, what does that look like in terms of here? Have they collected a range of data? Yes, they have. Have they established some current performance? Yes, they have. They've additional data collected, work sample, which they've annotated. They've used official curriculum and they've identified specific opportunities. So both have met them in slightly different ways. Some common things are here in terms of their data collects. A key difference perhaps was to establish the current level of performance. One was a pre-test in the high school mathematics, and the other one was a work sample connect. So both of these ably demonstrated that they have met planning practice number 1, planning using data.